right, if I had thought a little bit better, I probably would have changed the order of these classes around. There's nothing wrong with having the class we just had first, but I probably would have put the PHP class second because there's a lot of overlap between PHP and Joomla. All right, but what's that? Yeah, and well, there's a lot of things I wish I would have done, but I didn't. If you notice, Mark, who was in here before, Mark took the class last year. And there were a couple other people. I really wish the class that I had yesterday, I wish that I had changed that. I had that class on Tuesday, Thursday. No, it's a secure coding. It's a C class. But it's just, I guess I wasn't thinking. Now they made us at our in-service last week. We had to come out and literally schedule ourselves for the next 2 years. They want it so that anybody who comes and calls here can ask, what class are you offering and what time are you offering it at? You may or may not understand this, but people were really peeved that they had to do that because that's taking a lot of our creativity away, and it's saying, well, these two classes really should have been one after the other. Well, now they can't be. They're telling us we still can change them. I'll believe that when I see it. Right. That's right. So, all right. So this is web application development using ASP.NET. All that info is the same. Again, the stuff that's in here is pretty much the description of the course. Bring you up again to an intermediate level of understanding. But I want to show you something first. This is your book. Now, Muroc, which is the publisher of this book, every publisher is different. Do I have a PDF? Yes. But I had to download their Lock Lizard software in order to be able to access the PDF. Then they had to give me a code. And I literally had to beg them for a different code because it only works on one machine, and I wanted to put it also on the home machine that I have, the laptop. And that took 2 weeks. So, no, I can't put this out there. This is the book. I don't know if you've seen it. There should be plenty of copies of this book. All right, it's big. Yeah, because somebody told me before it's lethal. You hit somebody over the head with the spine hard enough, you could kill them. That's possible. I don't want to find out, and I'm asking that you don't try to find out either. All right. When I taught this class last time, which was a year ago, I used this book. And just to show you, these are the table of contents in the book. I'm not going to run through them with you. We did chapters 1 through 17, and then I also lectured on chapters 18 through 24. Okay, everybody with me? I'm not sure, but I think that those lectures are still out on Blackboard. It's possible they are. They may have been removed, but I grabbed some of the stuff before they retired the server. If they did, I'd like to put all those out there right away because we're going to be going through a lot of the same material. And you'd have all of them for the whole semester out there. But I can only do that if I can find them. All right. What I'd like to do this semester, though, just so you know, and it'll be interesting to get the take, especially from somebody like Mr. Wegman here, is rather than sitting there and going over chapter after chapter after chapter and seeing how much of this we can go through, I'd like us to at least get through the first 2 sections as quick as we possibly can. Okay, and when I say that, I don't mean we're going to rush through them. Not at all. But I just mean as quick as we possibly can. Okay? Then when we get to that point, rather than going through the database and the finishing, we can look at some database stuff. I don't have a problem with that. But I'd like to introduce a topic that you should know about that we haven't done much work with. And some of you who were here yesterday, you may have heard me talk about it. And that's the topic of MVC, or Model View Controller. And I'd like to show you how to build some ASP.NET applications using the Model View Controller architecture. I think that's going to make you more marketable because there's a good chance that if you go in for a job and you say, well, I don't want to be a programmer, I want to work in PHP. Sorry, that's a programming language. All right? I told students yesterday, and I might have told your class too, I'm getting, the more and more I'm working with CSS, I think that's a programming language too. And people can say, no, it's not. Yeah, I think it is. But there's a good chance that if you go for a job, be it as a regular, quote, regular programmer, or as a, quote, web developer, something like that, you'll be asked if you have any experience with Model View Controller, or at least if you have an understanding of what the topic is. So when we get to that point, I'd like to kind of branch off and go through some of that stuff. We can still look at this, all right, but I'd like to do that and then do some MVC. So we'll see how it goes, period. All right. So when you look at this, so what I'm saying is I want to go through section 1, an intro to ASP.NET programming. Okay, there's 1. Number 2, how to develop a one-page web app. Okay. Next, how to use HTML5 and CSS3 with ASP.NET apps. Good. 4, how to use a multi-page web app. 5, testing and debugging. That's good. All looks good. 6, what you're going to find when we start looking at this stuff. I believe, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but virtually all of you in here were in the C# class with me last semester, and if you weren't, you took the VB.NET class. All right, and I know some of you took it a little off, you know, whatever. And that's okay. All right, but the reason I'm telling you that is when we worked with Visual Basic.NET, or when we worked with C#, all those controls that you created, as far as we're concerned in here, those are all referred to as HTML controls. And what that means is they were all basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Reconciled on the client. What you're going to learn as we start getting into chapter 6, and that's why you see the little icon on there, is you're going to learn about server controls. What's the difference between a server control and an HTML control? They look almost identical. But when you have a server control, every server control that you create will have this in there as one of its attributes. Run at equal server, which means instead of reconciling it at the client, reconcile it at the server. Does that make sense? All right. Now, we don't have to worry in here about XAMPP or anything else, because what ASP.NET has is it has a built-in server, the equivalent of a server built into it, so you can run your jobs. All right. You might look, if you look at enough old documentation, they used to call it for some reason, I don't know if it's someone's name or whatever, it used to be called Cassini. But Microsoft has taken that out of their documentation. So I don't know if Cassini ticked somebody off or what. Now, when you get done with this, and you want to stand this stuff up, okay, you can stand it up and you can use Apache, you can use Unix or Starnix, all right, but many of the things that use this are Microsoft shops, so they use IIS, which you may or may not have heard of. IIS is kind of like XAMPP from Microsoft. Now, boy, if somebody from Microsoft was here, they'd hit me over the head for saying that, but it pretty much is the same kind of thing. All right. Okay, once we get into that, we'll use validation. And you might say, I hate validation. You don't have to write a line of code. It's all written for you by you clicking some mouse, doing some mouse clicks. All right, so we'll get into that. We'll learn how to work with state. All right, and you're gonna learn how to use session state and cookies up the wazoo this semester, because you get it in 2 or 3 different classes, which is good because you can kind of compare and contrast the way that you're doing it. All right. Then we'll go into master pages. What's a master page? When you create a master page, you basically, it's kind of like creating a template page. So if you look at a master page, and granted, if you're watching this on the tape, you won't see it, but I'm just drawing a big square. And if this is your website, and up at the top of your website, you've got your header. And at the bottom of the website, you've got your footer. And maybe on the side of your website, you've got some navigation or something else. Everybody with me? It's kind of a standard design. I know sometimes you got the navigation up here. It doesn't matter. But this area, that would be your master page. So if every single page you create from that page would look like this, what would differ, that's your content area in the middle. So you can make the content look different for every page. All right, so when we get to that point, we'll create a master page, and then you'll create other pages off of that. If you've got a site that has a master page on it, does every single page on there have to be off the master page? No. It gets even more confusing in that you can have multiple master pages. Not only that, you can have master pages embedded inside of master pages. And if you hear that, you go, why would you ever want to do that? Imagine that if they created the BTC site and actually did it the right way. All right, and when they did it, they were going to create a master page. So every page would have this kind of look and feel to it. Okay? But then they had a page inside of there that was called division pages. So maybe they wanted the outlined page for every division, business division, IO division, to look the same. Then you could have a master page inside of a master page if you wanted to do that. Plus you can have pages like an error page you wouldn't want it to look like a master page. You might want it to be real simple and have big red writing in it that says error you should never have gotten here, or danger Will Robinson, or whatever you're going to say. But that doesn't have to be inside of a master page. So we'll get to that in Chapter 9. Themes. Themes, technically, you know this already, that when you create an HTML control, all right, you can add CSS to it. You all know that. And you've done that kind of stuff before. All right? What themes basically are, and again, I'm being very general in nature here because we haven't gotten there yet, but literally what a theme is it's kind of like adding CSS, but it's like adding it to server controls instead of client controls. All right? And you can create your own theme. And if you say, I don't get it, let me show you something real quick here. I want to get the page here, and then I'll bring it up online. There you go. Perfect. I want page 325, but oh my gosh, no, I didn't find it. 311, so 14 more pages. 347. All right. That's the same website. But probably you'd agree with me, it looks markedly different between the two, because there's two different themes that were used on the website. You sort of get what I'm talking about? It's a look and feel type of thing. All right? And then, jumping back then to Chapter 11, yeah, we learn how to create a sitemap. And it's really and truly isn't hard to do. Again, I think at least it's very intuitive. Then when we get to this point, I'd like to show you some of this stuff, but I'd like to collapse that down and then get into being able to show you some MVC stuff. All right, so that's my plan. Again, if for some reason you have a really big problem with that, and you think, no, we ought to just be going through what's in the book, then talk to me offline. All right, and we'll talk about it. Now, it's kind of interesting, just in the little bit of talk that took place, in the break and stuff, and Mike was talking a little bit about Joomla and some other things. It got me to thinking about something that I had been thinking about before, but I wanted to bring up with you. What I'm about to tell you, I'm making a suggestion. And if you say your suggestion stinks, then don't do it. It's totally fine. But you should all be adept enough that if I were you, if I was in your place right now, I would be thinking about getting my own domain name, all right, whatever it is, starting to look at that and starting to put together a site that, if nothing else, has examples of the work that you've been doing in it. Because again, when you go and you're interviewing, and if somebody says you have any examples of your work, and you go, do you have an internet connection? All right. Most people don't provide that. I'm not saying no one does, but most people don't provide that. And they can go to your site then, and they can look at your work, and they can see an example of what you've done, and that's a reflection of you. So if you're going to do that, have a somewhat pleasing site. Don't have a piece of garbage out there, or don't use like back in the olden days when Microsoft would give you templates for this stuff. Don't do that. All right, use something that shows some creativity, because it's a reflection of you. But you can buy a domain name. We were talking about this yesterday, and it usually is around. It might be a little more expensive when you first buy it, but it's about $15 a year. It's something like that. All right, and once you buy that, again, you'll need some kind of a hosting thing. There are places out there. I would tell you to be very leery of free hosting. It's free for a reason. All right, so you might use it, and it might be gone tomorrow, or they might have totally disappeared, or whatever. And Mike might even have his own story about that, but it happens. Yeah. That's right. We were talking about that yesterday. So if you know, if Travis wants travisbaker.com, and he knows he wants that, you can check and see if it's available, but as soon as you do that, the best way to check would be to literally go into your address bar and type it in, www.travisbaker.com, and if nothing came up, it's probably available. But there are people that make a living that, we were talking about this before. I wish about 10 or 15 years ago I had gone and bought BarackObama.com. Because I think I could have sold it and probably made myself a few bucks on it. I would make a bet that if you go and look out there right now, ChrisChristie.com, ScottWalker.com, etc., they're all taken. But that's called parking a website, and people do that.
Yeah. Somebody parked TravisBaker.com.
See, they already grabbed it.
They want to sell it.
There you go.
So instead of paying $15 for it, you can probably pay $500 for it. Yeah. And I lost a site that way.
Yeah. And as soon as you go out there and you go in, and there are sites that allow you to check, as soon as you do that, there's people who check those sites all the time.
For what people have been looking for. They
Yes. Yeah, they have, right. That's why a lot of times you'll see something, so instead of Travis Baker, it might be TravisBaker123.com or something like that. That's why you get that. Because people say, screw it, I'm just going to add something onto it. Right. But you don't have to do that, but you might want to start looking into stuff like that. All right. Because, it's not going to be that long, and it's going to be next semester. Unless you've got a job already lined up. Okay. That's one of the reasons I'm bringing those people in here for those projects. All right, so you get a chance to show your wares type of thing. That's too big. All right, so they go through, this is a typical book from Muroc as far as what it gives you, etc. And that's fine. If you notice there, they talk about support materials. I want to show you something. You may or may not have looked through this, but in case you have not, okay, please look up on the screen. This is the source code, right, not there, student download. That's all the source code for the entire book. Not only all the programs that are in the book, but all the exercises they give you at the end of the chapter. Did you hear that? That's everything. Notice that it's 70 meg, and that's zipped. It's not small. Travis, if I were you, I would have started downloading it on your machine yesterday. All right? But all the PowerPoints for that are here. Okay? I also want to show you this. This is if you decide, think about this, because I'm trying to give you some options here. If you'd want to go down this route, we could go down that route too. I'm going to type in this. MVC Music Store Tutorial. What I'm about to show you is really cool. The only problem is it's old. If something that you're working on with MVC is, this is back in I think MVC 3. Microsoft put this really cool project out there that you can go back and you can build. Notice it's called MVC, Model View Controller. And you go in and there's tapes, etc. And you can go in and build a website like that. The problem is it's compatible with MVC 3 and the one now is MVC 5 and it hasn't been updated. But if you do have any interest in looking at it, I put that out there. There's the source code for it. There's the site. And they even have a 143-page, I think, PDF of the whole thing where they walk you through it step by step. As always, I'd rather give you way too much information and have you say, I don't care. Then don't use it. It's okay. You're not hurting my feelings at all. But again, in the student download, just so you see this, 68.6 meg it says. All right, so what's in there? All the applications that are in the book, all the databases that are used in the book, all the exercises that are in the book, the solutions to those exercises that are in the book. You say, wow, that's got to make it tough, Jeff. Yeah, but they also have an instructor's exercises, which you don't have. All right, and I used that one last year. I might use that again this year. I don't know. I don't want to give you homework on every one of these, because if we do this, just going through 9 chapters, go through a chapter, give you a week of lab. Go through a chapter, that would take the whole semester. right, so some of these I won't give you homework on. Some of these we might do together. All right. Again, as always, if you have a problem with that, then you've got to let me know. All right, so that's their support materials. And good or bad, that's one thing that Muroc does with all their books, is they always provide all of the complete set of PowerPoint slides for the book, the test banks, the solutions to their projects, etc. They're always in there. All right. All right, so I want to go through Chapter 1 right now, and we'll see how far we can get on that before break. And then after the break, we'll all get on and we'll write a simple program as a class so you can see some of the differences between this and some of the stuff you've used before. Now, for John, I think, and for Travis, I think you both took the VB.NET class. You know, the syntax is different for C#. You need a semicolon at the end of each line, and there's still IntelliSense, but the way you do things is not exactly the same between the two languages, but they're both Microsoft, and they're similar. I don't think the transition for either one of you, knowing your abilities, will be tough at all. And I think those are the only two that are in the class part here that, oh, you have it too? Okay, still, all of you, I don't think you'll have a problem with it. All right, and if you do, let me know. All right. Again, I know I showed you, I've shown this site before to you. I don't think I showed you this yesterday, but constantly I'm pushing people out to tutorialspoint.com, and notice they have a C# tutorial. So if I go down here and grab this, which will come up sooner or later, but it's probably 40, 50 or more pages, and I'll post that out there too. All right, so if you need that, it'll be available. All right. Okay, one thing I want you all to understand is this is the first time, this class, not Joomla, even though Joomla is too, but this is the first class directly that we're doing server-side programming. Everybody hear that? This is the first time. Java, although you can use Java on the server side, and it's being used more and more on the server side, we use it as just a client-side tool. But I'm going to put this up there. I'm not even going to save this because it's not that big a thing, but I want you to see this. But some of the languages like ASP.NET, PHP, JSP, which stands for Java Server Pages, if you didn't know that. ASP, you probably know that, but that stands for Active Server Pages.NET. And PHP depends on the book you read, the time of the month it is, whatever. But technically with PHP, it originally stood for Personal Homepage. That was originally what it stood for. All right. Now most books will tell you that it stands for PHP Hypertext Processor. And there's different variations. It really and truly doesn't matter. But the point is, these are three things where you do things from the server side as opposed to from the client side. And I very quickly want to tell you some of the ramifications of this. With all the JavaScript and the stuff that we created, basically I think you'd all agree that we all had HTML extensions, okay, with all the work we've done. Those are going to be, for lack of better words, mostly going away for now. All right, when you create ASP pages, okay, there's going to be two kinds. There's two ways you can do this, but we're going to only do it one of the ways. Just one sec. The files that we have that have our controls and all that stuff, and it will end with .aspx. All right, our code files will be .aspx.cs for C#. It is possible to take and combine these into one file and put all of your C# inside of an ASPX file. You can do that. But then every time you put in the code, you've got to type in, I think it's this, and then you've got to end it with this. And I might not even be complete there. But it's a foolish way to do things. We're going to separate our content from our presentation. Okay, we're going to do it the, quote, right way. All right. In PHP, it changes. In PHP, all of your PHP files will end in .php. And you can either embed them right inside of your HTML, or you can include them separately. Okay, we're going to do both. Just so you know that. We're going to start simple. We'll just embed our PHP right inside of it. What gets confusing with this stuff too, okay, what gets confusing is the support it has for different kinds of products. You can use PHP to write HTML. You can use PHP to write JavaScript. Or you can break out a PHP and just put in HTML or JavaScript. You can do a lot of the same stuff in ASP, but you don't have to. What you're going to find is basically the PHP we do is not going to be very GUI. All right? I'm not saying it won't be GUI. It's not going to be nearly as GUI as this stuff that we do. All right, your question? Yes. Oh yeah, I'm sure MSDN has one. There's all sorts of tutorials that are out there. And again, some of them are better than others. But I'm just telling you, I think that one is probably pretty good. No. In fact, even the amount of code that we use in here, I'm not going to say it's minimal, but for the first several chapters, it's minimal. What's really kind of cool with this is you can create yourself an entire database application that allows you to insert records, delete records, and update records, an entire application without writing a line of code. Nothing, not a line. Now, if you want to customize it, you have to add code. And typically you would. But you could make a really simple thing with no code. That's an ASP. It's not in PHP. PHP, you're going to have to write code for virtually everything you want to do. Okay? And again, no one's asked, but why? So why those two and why not Java server pages? I used to teach Java server pages, the 167 class that you all took last semester, the Ajax, the jQuery class. That used to be a class in JSP. I don't remember ever having a group go through it that didn't tell me, I hate this class. I hate you a little more now for having taught this class. It was the hardest class probably in the curriculum. We had to, you talked about Tomcat before, we had to configure Tomcat, and that was back when I didn't have any help, and I was just Googling the world. And we would get stuff to work, and sometimes you'd get stuff to work, and the next day you came in without making a change, it didn't work. We had no idea why. So I just went away from that route. That's why. Plus, again, I think that if you understand ASP.NET website development, including Model View Controller, and you can do PHP, and we may not look at any Model View Controller and PHP this semester, but we probably will next semester, I think you're very marketable. All right. So they're saying here, this is what you go in Chapter 1, the concepts and terms you need. Chapter 2, a simple one-page site. Chapter 3, how to intersperse HTML5 and CSS3 in your app. I'm going to show you a few tricks, some of which are not in your book. Chapter 4, a one-page shopping cart. So it's real simple. All right, Chapter 5, testing and debugging. Okay, so just so you know, throughout this book, even in the database and everything else, this is the app that they have you work on. The author calls it the Halloween Superstore. All right, when you go through just the one-page app, it's not going to be where you can actually sit there and buy stuff with it because you need multiple pages. All right, but we'll build a one-page app first. All that code is, again, where I showed you in those student downloads. But I would suggest as we start to go through stuff that at least some of it, when you get time, and I'll give you time, you key it in. That's how you learn how to use this. To just unzip something, bring it up, and have it run in a browser and say, look what I did. No, you didn't. You brought up something that somebody else did in a browser. Even if you key in something that's simple that they've already done, but you do it yourself, you're going to make mistakes. And that's how you learn. All right? You already know how to use the compiler because you're going to compile the same way. You already know how to use the editor because it's the same editor. You already know how to use some of the debugging tools, but there'll be more that we'll get to. Things like traces and et cetera that we'll get to in Chapter 5. But you know how to do a lot of the stuff already. All right? So let's notice what's in here. An intro to web apps, an intro to ASP.NET web app development, and how this works. I'm going to go through this. Will we finish this by the break? Probably not, the way that this stuff's been going, and that's okay. But I'm going to count on you that as we're going through this stuff, you'll ask questions if you have questions. And if you're only half listening, all right, you know, again, I always go back to Tony Reynolds when he was here last semester. We were talking once, and he asked, I don't know if he asked me if I thought he had ADD, because he would tell me he could never, ever concentrate on one of my lectures. And but a lot of times I'd be lecturing, and I'd say something, and he'd think I was wrong. He'd be writing a program to try to prove me wrong. And I don't have a problem with that because he was getting it in his own way. All I'm saying, and I mentioned this yesterday, I think it was a lab assistant I was talking to, you know, if there are people in this room, you know who you are. I'm not asking. There are people in this room that will not read this book. There might even be people in this room who won't buy this book. And that's your call. But there's no way in heck that even in these first, if we just go through the first 11 or whatever it is chapters, that I can go through every single thing that's in this book. There's just not enough time. I'm going to go through and highlight what I think are the most important points. But for you to really have an understanding, you should go through and at least try to take the time, take an hour, and page through the book, read through it, underline what you think is important, however you do it. All right, that's the end of that sermon. So, yes.
Actually, on that topic, I'm going to quote a friend of mine who graduated from here the year before me in the networking program. He said, Blackhawk offers a great education. It's too bad most students don't take advantage of it. Now, there's a lot offered here that people don't grab because they figure if they pass, that's all that matters. But
For a long time here, we had a lot of students who were taking courses in this program, and they were already in the field. And it used to be at Blackhawk, you may or may not know this, so they didn't care about credit. So they were auditing classes. And it used to be at Blackhawk up until about 5 years ago. When you audited, you only paid half price. Then the school got either smart or dumb, depending on your point of view, and they said, you know what, you're still in the class, even if you're not doing the homework. They started charging people full price. Okay? But Doug Tabbitt came up with a saying back when people were auditing, but it applies whether it's auditing or not, because we had certain students that we were advising to audit certain classes, and going along with what Mike said, he said, you ever hear this, the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink? He would say, Jeff, you can lead a student to audit, but you can't make them think. And it's the same kind of an idea that he's talking about. You know, you're going to get out of this what you want to get out of it. So, and it's funny because right now, I'm not going to say who, but one of the students that graduated a couple years ago from this program is now a Java programmer. You might say, so? When they went through the program, all they did was spend 2 semesters telling me how much they hated frickin' Java. But it's one thing I'm never going to do for a living. They're doing it now because they're making a good living doing it. And now Java's not that bad. All right. So figure 1.1 shows some views of the shopping cart. So that's the order page. That should be pretty obvious what's going on there. All right. And there's the actual shopping cart page. But I can't, let's see, can I make this smaller? Oh, lovely. One more. All right. I know that's a little harder to see, but I think you still get the idea. I want to have them both on here. And I want to make sure that the stuff I'm about to say makes sense to you. Okay? For instance, please select a product. There's a drop-down list. Everybody see the drop-down list? All right. Where are they populating that drop-down list from? Well, I don't know. Yeah, you do. Travis just said it. From a database. All right. Which is nice because as soon as you add a new product, boom, it's going to go in there. And if you put it in there and you tell it to present it here and sort it, you've got your choice. You know that. You can sort it in ascending, descending, or whatever order you want to sort it in. All right. You can even sort it by a field that's not one of that, and that's not that field. All right. But that's a server control because it's getting information from a database that exists on a database server. All right. Okay. That's just some random text, etc. But that price and that thing, again, they're grabbing that information about the price and the image from a database someplace. Okay? The quantity, that's going to be sent probably out to a database, right? When they're filling up your order. And once you do that and you click add to cart, okay, or it'll add it to your cart, and if you click go to cart, you're going here. So what is it doing? It's going to go in here, and if you look at this now, and make it, whoops, not that little. But if we make it bigger now, what do we have? You can remove an item, or you can empty the cart. All right? And when you click continue shopping, push you back to here. If you click checkout, it's going to bring you to yet another page where it's always going to verify what you want to do, etc. Does all that make sense? Can you understand where you'd need to have a database in here in order to be able to do all this stuff? Does that make sense? All right, because that's what we're going to be talking about as we go on in the semester. So they go through here. This is the kind of stuff you should have seen before. There shouldn't be anything that's in here that really doesn't surprise you. This, and also, this is me talking, so maybe you've heard this before, maybe you've thought this, maybe you think that what I'm about to say is a really stupid comment, but I think one of the reasons they call it the cloud is there have literally been millions of pictures of the internet over the years, and they always make it look like a cloud. That's just me. I really do think that's why they did it. And it sort of makes sense when you think about it. Because when you think about it, when you look at a cloud, sometimes you look at a cloud that's a certain color and you go, there could be a hell of a lot of rain behind that. Or it could blow away, or whatever. All right. But again, there's our clients. There's our server. And again, between this semester and next semester, you're going to be introduced to a lot of server-side technology and a lot of mobile technology. John will tell you because he went through the Android class last semester. It'll be a lot better class this semester because they were all guinea pigs. All right. But we're going to get some Android stuff even this semester. The point is, it's not just a desktop anymore, not just a laptop anymore. It could be anything. All right? And they're making it simple, right? Because there's one server there. Quite often there's going to be a lot of servers. I'm not going to go through the components of a URL. You ought to know that stuff already. Same thing here. Am I right in assuming that you all understand that a page that ends with an extension of .html is a static page? Right? Okay, and it's always going to look the same unless you literally take it offline or if you can edit it while it's up, which you can do sometimes, etc. You all understand the idea of an HTTP request and an HTTP response. All right. Again, it's funny because they show this one because before class, I went out there and I went to their homepage. And that looks almost exactly the same all the time. The only thing they change in here sometimes is this one. Because as they get a new book, they'll move the book out that was in there and move in a new one. But other than that, and eventually that'll become either Muroc C# 2013 or 2014 whenever they write their next book. But what I'm telling you is there's a real good chance that you could go to this website in a month and it won't look any different whatsoever. All right? And notice .htm. Does everybody know the story too behind this? Between the difference between HTML and HTML? Back in the day of DOS, you only could have a 3-character extension. That was it. So back in those days, people called their files .htm. A lot of them just never changed. It really doesn't matter whether you put .htm or .html. Now, what we're getting into here is dynamic pages and how they're processed. We did a little bit of dynamicity last semester. You may or may not remember. Virtually everybody who's in here that was in the class, the jQuery class last semester, you did at least some work with jQuery where you were doing stuff dynamically. You might have worked with that Joe's Pizza site or done your own or whatever. But you saw that, a little bit of the interactivity. But all that interactivity that we did was coming from the client side. Now we're talking about interactivity from the server side, which means, again, we're going to be going and we're going to be writing code. That code is going to be sent to a server, whether it's internal, doesn't matter. It's going to be sent to a server. That server is going to have to siphon out, do with it what it wants to do, bless you, and typically send us back probably HTML, bless you. But there's going to be HTML response or HTTP response, HTTP request, just like we had in the past. So if I went through that too quick or you don't remember that from before, there's the picture, and we've talked about it before. All right. Again, this is just I'm not going to lie here. If I sat there and I said, everybody, be totally honest. How many of you did a lot of work with your computer and with ASP, except this summer? And I said, really, don't lie. Probably not too many hands would go up. And I wouldn't expect that anyway. It's funny, I took one ASP, one of these classes I was taking online over the summer. It was god-awful terrible. I'm glad it was free. If I'd have paid $5 for it, I would have asked for the $5 back. 30 lessons, and each one got worse. And I sat through and listed all 30 thinking they had to get better. They didn't. And it had nothing to do with this, so please don't think I'm sexist. It was a woman She never changed the inflection of her voice once, except when she started, "Hi, my name's Patty." Everyone started like that. "Today we're going to talk about master pages." "Now, when you use a master page," and that was like that. These are 20-minute long lectures, and there were, I think, 32 of them, and I watched all 32 of them, and I learned not a frigging thing. All right, but what we have in here again, what they're telling you here is, typically, again, when you put it out on and stand it up on a, quote, real website, unquote, it'd be IIS you'd be using. All right? And again, there could be multiple servers involved. We already talked about that, so there's nothing new with that. All right. So what they talk about in here is they get into, on page 12, if one of you would tell me when it's about 5 minutes to, I'd appreciate it. So on page 12 in here, they come in and they're talking about, as soon as I can find it, 5 ways to develop ASP.NET web applications. And they're showing them right here. Virtually everything that we do for the first half of this semester will be ASP.NET web forms. And that's kind of a good thing for you because ASP.NET web forms, other than the fact that you're using server controls, look and act a lot like C# web forms that we did last semester or VB.NET web forms that you did earlier. They look and they act pretty much the same. Okay? The MVC I already mentioned to you, the model view controller stuff. Model view controller, typically when you're doing it, that's where Razor comes in. So I'm not going to talk about that. All right. Dynamic data entities, we'll look at that a little bit, but that has to do, again, a lot more with the database stuff, just so you know. And the reports website, just so you know with the report website, I'm asking. If you don't know, don't lie. Just ask. How many people have ever heard of a product, a software product called Crystal Reports? All right. ASP.NET provides control for Crystal Reports. There are many companies that use Crystal Reports for their reporting structure. You know, when you create order entry reports, accounts receivable reports, etc. You can literally meld and write your code and then call up and create your Crystal Reports. You can create your own reports too, if you want. I mean, if you don't like the way Crystal Reports are set up, but you can do a lot of customization with them. We're not going to do anything with that. All right, but that's it right there. So if you want to read that, either here or it's on page 13 in your book, you can. All right. 3 different environments for this, and again, let's go to the next page. This is what I've shown you. This is what we're going to be using in here. All right, I called it Cassini. What they're saying is you are using basically a very simplistic scaled down IIS built-in server when you're doing it. Fine. Will that matter? It will, because I want us to after the break, create a simple project, just so you can see a little bit of it and see the stuff you're going to have to do. All right. All right. Am I right in assuming you all know the difference between Internet and Intranet? Yes? Is there anyone who doesn't? And don't lie. All right. If I'm working at Blackhawk Technical College and I go here, that's Blackhawk Tech's Internet site. Okay? I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. That's Blackhawk Tech's Internet site. If I go here, inside.blackhawk.edu, notice the first thing that comes up is it asks me to identify myself. And I don't know if it's got my new password or my old ones. Looks like my new one. That's the intranet. That's only available, that view is only available to me and other employees. Now, there might be an intranet site for you guys too. I don't know. Not to be mean. I don't care. Now, I can also get into it from home if I want to, but instead of inside, I have to say outside. All right. But notice I had to verify who I was when I got in. All right. It had to know that I'm me. But I did choose on there, save, so it saved it for me. All right, that's an intranet site, so that's a site that's designed to be used by basically Blackhawk Tech employees. All right, does that answer the question? Make sense? There's also an extranet site that they don't talk about here, but if you would imagine, no, they don't tell it here, but you imagine Kelly did some work this summer, right? He was doing work for Blaine's. And Blaine's, they deal with companies like Coleman, Coleman Lanterns, for example. They might have an extranet site set up where Coleman can come in and see certain things from Blaine's, and Blaine's can see certain things from Coleman. Okay, yeah, right. And you're right. There's a lot of other ones too. But the point is, let's say I don't know if there's another company like Coleman, but let's say there's another company that we'll just call it Company X. That they might have an extranet site too with Blaine's, but Blaine's can see their stuff, and they can only see, etc. But you wouldn't want Company X to be able to see Coleman stuff and vice versa. They would like to do that, but that would compromise pricing and all sorts of other stuff. But that would be an extranet type of site. All right. Yeah, and you're right. There's business to business. Sometimes it's called that. There's B2B, B2C, which is business to consumer. All right. There's there's C2C. There's all sorts of different types that are like that. All right. Here's the additions, just so you do know this. Let's pretend for a second that John goes home and he doesn't, I don't think, but let's just say John's got a dial-up. That's his connection. And no matter how hard he tries, he can never do much of anything when he's at home. All right, that using the virtual desktop. Well, you can go out and you can download Visual Studio Express 2012 for web for free. And every single thing that we do in this class and in this book, you'll be able to do on there, if you want to do that. So if you want to do it from your own machine, you can do it. So you might say, well, if it's free, then what doesn't it have? It doesn't have all the database support. It doesn't have support for things like those crystal reports that I showed you, because they want you to upgrade. They want you to pay for that stuff. All right, but you could use that if you wanted to. It's already on, and even for all the people who are in here who are not in this class, you've got Visual Studio. It's part of your virtual desktop. All right, one more quick thing, and then we're taking a break. If you look on page 17, this is how .NET works internally. Java, I don't think we probably ever talked about this. Did we ever at the beginning of the semester talk about something called the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine? Remember hearing the term at least? Okay. Basically, it's the internals that when you go and it's another layer, yeah, but literally when you go in and you interpret a Java program, it gives you your .class file. Then when you run it, it does the compilation of the class file. Well, the equivalent of that in .NET land is the .NET framework. And the biggest thing that's in here, all the stuff matters, of course, but the biggest part is what's called the CLR. So the CLR is pretty much the equivalent of the JVM. Again, if I had people here from Microsoft and from Java, they would be just reaming me up and down. No, ours is better. Who gives a rat's butt? It's pretty much the same thing. All right? But what it does is, rather than creating a class file, and you won't see this because it does it, and it just jumps to the next step. It creates, Microsoft has never been one to toot their own horn, but where it says intermediate language, it creates something that's called a .msil file, Microsoft Intermediate Language. That's like the .class file that we had in Java. But it goes through and does all that stuff for you. All I'm trying to tell you is it's a framework. All right? .NET actually supports, the last I heard, around 30 different languages. All right? It even has some hooks for Java and stuff in it. All right, Microsoft had said originally they were never going to allow you to work with non-Microsoft products. There's just too big a demand. They're not stupid. Microsoft's a lot of things, but they're not stupid. All right. So let's take a break. We'll pick it up on page 18. How state is handled. I'm gonna actually pick up the pace a little bit. There's probably about 10 more pages left in this chapter. I'm gonna try to do those in about 15 or 20 minutes, and then have us get on the system and just write a simple app so you can see it in action. All right. What we write is going to be real simple too, just so you know.